Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new League of Legends video. So it's time again to look at the next patch that'll be coming in just about a week and a half, an early look into patch 7.6. I started doing this about a month ago and it seems like you guys really enjoy this type of video, just taking a very early look into the next coming patch, the biggest things and what Riot seems to be planning and the biggest changes and things like that. Overall just getting us prepared for what's coming. So if you guys still enjoy this kind of video and you want me to continue doing this, giving you this very early look into the biggest things coming for the next patch, then let me know by hitting that like button. But let's talk about the very first thing. Now this one's going to be very interesting because it's to a champion that's not even actually out, the Gallio rework. It seems like he's already getting kind of gutted. He's getting nerfed to the point where Riot has realized that in just those few days of him being out, tank Gallio on the PvE at the moment is just way too ridiculous. So they pretty much all around nerfed him in many different areas and changed the way he works to try and make tank Gallio not so good, but make a slightly more offensive Gallio, building a bit more damage in AP, slightly better and a bit more intriguing. So the question of course is, how exactly did they do that? Well, here it is. First we have his passive, which honestly I even thought of when I played him on the PvE had a little bit too much of just base damage. So the base damage has been overall lowered. It'll be slightly higher in the first couple of levels, but it will ramp up much slower and the maximum damage it'll do is 60 less. Following this, it doesn't seem like there's any AD ratio on his passive anymore. Instead it's now replaced with a 40% AP ratio, though this could still be maybe changed around. But the biggest thing is the fact that now his passive only scales off of bonus magic resistance, not your total magic resistance. And on top of this, to make things even worse, his bonus MR ratio on his passive has been lowered to 40% at all ranks rather than starting at 40 and then slowly ramping up to 60. So all in all, his passive definitely receiving some pretty hefty nerfs. It's still gonna have that AP ratio, which if you actually build AP maybe like Rod of Ages, it'll still be kind of okay, but for the most part, it definitely hit quite hard. Now to try and kind of make up for this, Riot is going to be buffing his Q by a little bit, increasing the range by 25 and making the initial dot base damage just ever so slightly higher. Now in all honesty, I already thought his Q was actually quite damn good. The range was quite good, the damage was very solid. So the fact that they're buffing his Q, which was already in my opinion probably his best ability other than his ultimate, it's actually quite cool. Now the reason for this, keep in mind, is they're trying to incentivize, just building damage Gallio, more kind of AP-ish Gallio rather than this just complete tanky Gallio. So they're trying to kind of buff the damage abilities and make you want to actually just really utilize them and get more of those AP offensive items to make them even better. But following this, his W has also received a nerf. Now the first actual buff that happened to it is a very small one, but you can now channel the part where he taunts and before you let go of it and actually do the taunting, just ever so slightly longer. But here's where the nerfs kick in. The damage reduction linger duration has been lowered from 4 seconds to 2 seconds, so literally half of the time you'll get that bonus effect. The 4% per 100 bonus armor ratio on the damage reduction has been completely removed. So those are obviously quite big, so if you just go top Gallio and you just go pure tank and just stack the shit out of armor, well, it's just not going to be as good anymore whatsoever. And even if you're still playing mid Gallio, the damage reduction is only 2 seconds rather than 4, which is a pretty big deal. To slightly make up for this, they kind of buffed the cooldown overall on the ability. It'll now start on cast rather than discharge, and the overall cooldown has been lowered at the first few ranks. But it doesn't even stop there. They're still gonna be trying to nerf him down and make tanky Gallio, especially stacking armor, just not as viable. For his ultimate, the channel duration has been slightly increased, though the total time to land has been unchanged, but the 4% per 100 bonus armor, just like his W, has been completely removed. That ratio just simply does not exist any longer. So in other words, what have we learned? Well, stacking armor on Gallio just gives you pretty much no benefits whatsoever other than the actual base or raw stat itself. He has nothing that scales off of armor anymore at all. His W and his ultimate, completely gone. And even for some parts where he does work off of magic resistance like his passive, well, it's just simply weaker now by quite a bit. All in all, some pretty damn big nerfs happening to Gallio for the most part. Tank Gallio is just getting hit with an absolutely devastating hammer. So it's very interesting considering he's not even on live servers yet that Riot is already making these big changes and big nerfs to a champion that has been just unreleased. Now this is definitely the biggest part of the video that I wanted to discuss with you guys about, but there's still several more things to cover, just much quicker. So this one is going to be a buff to AATROX, but the thing that's interesting is the fact that I wanted to bring this up because it's actually already on the live servers. It didn't come with a patch initially when it rolled out on Wednesday. In fact, this actually happened on Friday. So think of it as a ninja buff, where AATROX's base health has been increased from 537 to 580, which is quite a bit actually, especially in the laning phase. That's a solid 2 auto attacks potentially. and his Dark Flight cooldown has been lowered from 16 to 12 all the way down from 13 at rank 1 to 11 rank 5. So overall, his early game is just simply better, getting a lot more extra HP, almost 43 extra HP, and having 3-second lower cooldown on his Q, which now, if I'm not mistaken, you want to max maybe second or even last, since his E is just better in terms of maxing it into base damage and everything. This is a pretty damn good buff. But to put the cherry on the cake, they also ended up buffing his W. The damage increase from this has been changed from 30 up to 150 to starting off at 45, which is 15, to ramping up all the way to 85, which is an extra 35 damage. So again, maxing his E first, then his W, then his Q seems to be without question the way to go, while also just making his early game in the laning phase ever slightly better. The question still is this enough to make AATROX viable? Because at the moment, well, honestly, very kind of mediocre, doesn't seem to be really hitting the sweet spot just yet. Maybe these changes, which are again on the live servers, they were sort of ninja buffed or ninja inserted or whatever you want to call it on Friday, so keep in mind this is currently live. Now the next champion I want to talk about is going to be Fiddlesticks. Now Fiddlesticks is the jungler that has been quite MIA for a little bit now. I mean, you don't really see him too often because all you see are champions like either tanky ones, maybe like Zac or even sometimes Rek'Sai, or you just see the people that abuse lethality and the assassins like Kha'Zix, Rengar. Then you have someone even like Graves, or maybe even have someone like Hecarim who's sort of in between. I mean, you have a whole bunch of champions that are just simply better and outshining every other jungler, for instance Fiddlesticks. Well, it seems like Riot is finally putting the spotlight back onto this champion because the first buff he's receiving is to his Q, Terrify. The range has been increased from 525 to 575. Honestly, that's a pretty damn good buff. 50 increased range. This is gonna catch an insane amount of people off guard because people are probably very used to, you know, at what range you usually have to stay away from Fiddle to get feared or just to avoid it. But now that it's increased, Fiddle will be able to fear people at ranges that they're just not used to, ranges that they will not expect. So if you're someone that plays Fiddlesticks or has an idea on how to play him, once this goes to the live servers, I highly recommend spamming him and catching people off guard over and over and over. But to help his early jungle clear, which is definitely lacking, his E ability Dark Quinn has had its additional damage to minions and monsters increased from 50% to 75%. Now honestly, not the biggest thing in the entire world considering it's especially percent damage increase rather than some kind of base damage increase. But the goal here is of course to try and make his jungle clear and just his jungle pressure and the speed he does it at just ever slightly better. Now honestly, I don't play enough Fiddlesticks, so maybe this is actually more than enough, but I honestly think the buff to his Q is actually quite OP. Is going to give him an insane amount of extra range, and maybe the Dark Quinn additional damage to minions and monsters in the jungle will be enough to slowly finally put him back in the meta and make him what he once used to be, a pretty damn OP champion. Now there's a few smaller things that I want to very quickly touch on, the first of which is Misfortune. So the patch that just recently went to the live servers, she took a pretty damn big hit, especially to her laning phase with her Q and how it works. No longer will it do that extra bonus damage when it bounces, especially if it kills a target. Now you have to sort of pray that it'll crit. If it doesn't, then chances are you're doing very little damage, if not even maybe half the amount of damage you used to do with her Q harassed. Overall, her laning pressure has definitely fallen quite a bit. But it seems like Riot thinks that they may have gone a little bit too far with how hard they hit her Q. So it seems like Riot is going to be giving her a little bit of buffs, kind of a bandage over here to help her out with how hard they hit her. So the damage on her Q has been increased from regardless starting at 20 for both of them, but now it can go up all the way to 100 rather than 80. And even on top of this, the total AD ratio has been increased from 85% to 100%. Now definitely keep in mind that this buff that I just mentioned applies to both of the Q hits, the initial one where you actually hit the target first, and then the second one that bounces off and hits the second target or the champion or whatever. This applies to both of those shots. So I mean, again, it's definitely not back to where it used to be with how much damage it can do and how much kind of pressure it can really provide in the laning phase, but it's still at least something, and obviously it is regardless still a buff compared to what you currently have on the live servers. Following this change, I also want to talk about something very quickly happening to Quinn. So Quinn has been somewhat of a hidden OP or a secret OP champion, especially in mid lane or top lane, and she's been abusing lethality very well and being quite successful in solo queue. Now even though I don't think she became too meta, Riot has already put her on the radar and nerfed her down. The nerfs to Quinn are as follows. The heightened sensor W, the attack speed bonus, has actually been increased, right? It's been increased actually about double by rank 5, which is good. Her ultimate, Sky Strike, the total AD ratio has been lowered from 100%, which is quite good, all the way down to 40%. that is more than half of the damage just completely gone on that ratio, which is quite significant. So what this tells me is that they're trying to put Quinn in a spot where she's not necessarily as bursty or as assassin-y, but she can play still kind of bursty and still have that, initial spike damage, but be kind of transitioned more into an ADC, a traditional ADC, now with this huge buff to her attack speed on her W. Is this the right thing to do for her? I mean, I'm not entirely sure. It feels a little bit weird, and it's sort of underlining just the way she should be played, which is strange to me, honestly. But I mean, this is the direction that Riot seems to be trying to take her. Now, last but not least, I also very quickly want to talk about Warlord's Bloodlust, the new one, because it's also got a little bit of a change. So on the live servers, it'll give you 1 to 50% of lifesteal whenever you proc the effect, but now it will heal you for 1 to 50% of your total AD amplified by critical strikes. Now, I might be misinterpreting this, but from what I understand, what this means is instead of lifesteal, which is obviously affected by any damage you do with any ability that's physical damage, maybe like an Ezreal Q for instance, which also will work off of lifesteal, now it's strictly to your auto attacks. And the part that I'm very unsure about, honestly, is whether or not this works with armor reduction. So for instance, lifesteal works with armor reduction, so you'll only lifesteal the damage that you actually have dealt to the champion after all the mitigation has been put into effect. But this one, does it also apply the mitigation damage from armor, or will this simply just heal you based on the actual number you see in your AD stats, regardless of the damage you just dealt to your champion with all the armor mitigation and whatnot? So that's the one I'm kind of a little bit unsure of. But regardless, guys, I mean, that is about it for this video. There you have it, some pretty damn big changes again. Galio already getting absolutely gutted in the face before he even went to the live server, so consider tank Galio just absolutely dead. AATROX received a ninja buff, which I feel like a lot of people may have not known about since it did come about 2 days after the actual patch went live. And Fiddlesticks potentially becoming an OP champion if he's on Riot's radar, and he's consistently going to be getting more and more buffs. But either way, guys, that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, definitely hit that like button to let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one as well. Peace.